and started reading about SEO, and just basically like went home that night and kept reading the next day, and just was like absolutely hooked.
We personally, because we're bootstrapped and we're making profit in these things, we don't experience it personally, but I think anyway it directly affects like even your strategy and your approach when you understand that the whole sector obviously is going through a certain period.
We didn't totally know yet, but really landed on like the inbound model with the inside sales rep, and that started to work.
Most of the people, around 85% of the people, are actually declining cookies, so essentially you're losing most of the data in a way.
Even if that doesn't materialize into as many leads or new clients, over the next 9 to 12 months, there's still a great value in building our audience.
Hello, folks. Welcome to the TWIP podcast. And we have today Nate Turner from the Chicago area from the US. He basically is the co-founder and CEO of Tenspeed. He's helping companies optimize content, more specifically in the SaaS and D2C areas. And let's dive straight in. Nate, welcome. Where did you grow up, and what would you say was unique about you being there at your younger years?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me today. I'm excited to chat and dig into a lot of this stuff with you guys. Yes, I grew up in like a rural area in Midwest of the United States. So pretty well out in the country. But we did have kind of a nice small group of folks out there. So a number of kids my age and just a lot of space, a lot of freedom. So looking back on that, it certainly was a special thing to just have the ability to, ride bikes and kind of go all over and do things, having room to do all kinds of stuff out there. So, we live in the suburbs of Chicago now, so my kids don't have quite the same experience, so now seeing the difference, I would certainly appreciate what I had.
And when it came to
I see.
kind of career aspirations and things at this stage, like what was the kind of first job you had in your mind? What did you want to be when you were young, kind of running around those kind of areas? What was it that you aspired to become when you grew up?
Yeah, I think, like a lot of kids, I wanted to be a professional baseball player for quite a long time. But I think beyond that, probably by age like 11 or 12, for quite a long time, wanted to be an architect, actually. So that was kind of my intention for quite a long time was to become an architect.
Did you have any experiences actually in the architecture, or did you follow any courses in that area?
No, I knew even before getting like through the end of high school and into college, I kind of already knew that wasn't really a path that I wanted to take. So
I see.
Didn't actually get it.
Weirdly, I was
so actually.
Go ahead. I think I'm like slightly delayed, so bear with me. We might go over each other a little bit. Yeah, in terms of architecture, I was weirdly the same, right? At around 13 or 14, I remember buying this like CD-ROM for my PC, which was like building these like 3D like architecture kind of things. But again, for me, it also died out by the time I was like 16, 17, 18. It's weird. We had the same early idea about what we wanted to do. And what was your first job?
I was literally the same. Yeah.
What was your first job when you had gone?
Like a lot of kids in the Midwestern area, we were surrounded by corn. So one of the earliest jobs we were able to do was detasseling corn, which is just kind of a 3-week sprint. Really, is like 7 days a week. This is just a very short season where that job needs to be done, and so you just work 3 weeks straight basically as a kid and get paid some good money and then go back.
Sorry, this was this before high school or?
It was, yeah.
I see.
So like, there's not many jobs you're able to do. I think it's before 14 or 15 here. You're not allowed to really have a job, like an actual job as a kid. But that was one that was kind of an exception you're able to do as a contractor. So, so that was the first.
I see.
First real job that I had.
Yeah, because many marketers, even from our podcast, we saw that they don't have this like linear approach to marketing. They had several jobs. They come from many diverse areas of expertise. So when were you first conscious that you might go into marketing, or why marketing in a way?
Yeah, so I kind of had an interesting path because I kind of at end of high school and into college was actually very into music and was kind of interested in like the business side of the music industry. And so kind of originally set out to do more around that and kind of study in the area and be able to potentially move into some sort of like, record label or some sort of job in that industry. And so started out there, but then kind of quickly realized like you're pretty limited geographically. Like you got to be in Nashville or in LA or a few specific areas, and I didn't like that level of restriction. So just started thinking about like what I liked out of that, and so kind of pivoted into a degree that was kind of a mix of communication and business. And started to kind of understand like within that there was sort of marketing, advertising, PR, a lot of different elements of comms. And so that's kind of through that started to understand a little bit of a pull towards marketing and also just a bit of a knack for it as well.
Great. And as it was back in 2011, right, when you first joined Sprout Social as their first marketing hire. And so our next question typically is around kind of 2 to 3 different kind of situations or kind of big learnings that you went through early in your career. I expect there's a huge amount that came from that time at Sprout Social. Can you kind of pinpoint, maybe 2 or 3 different kind of like key learnings or situations that really taught you a lot about marketing during that time there?
Yeah, I would say even before joining Sprout, so came out of school and I kind of just had like a couple different, a little more general business management type roles. And so still wasn't like fully in on marketing. But through a sort of like a series of events, was asked to kind of help manage a website project for the company I was working with. And talking to the developer, she asked me what SEO keywords I wanted to use on the homepage. And I was like, let me get back to you. And I Googled, what are SEO keywords? And I didn't and started reading about SEO and just basically like went home that night and kept reading the next day and just was like absolutely hooked. So that was definitely, a key moment that led me down that path that ultimately then pulled into the broader marketing aspect of it. So that was definitely a key moment. And then, moving from there, I worked at an agency that was like heavily SEO, but we did PPC and web projects, a number of other things. But then from there was when I really was like following the startup world closely, reading hacker news and just all kinds of stuff, in kind of 2009, 2010. And then got the opportunity to join Sprout Social, like you said, in 2011. So that was definitely another big moment because that was I just reached out. They didn't even have an open role. I just sent an email and just said, hey, I really like what you guys are building and this is what I do. I'd love to do it for you. So I didn't have a lot of expectations necessarily. It was sort of like I would love to do marketing with this company that looks pretty cool. Ended up getting the job and came on. I think my original title was like online marketing director, and so I was the first marketer there and started building and doing the early stages of marketing, and didn't really, even then, was just sort of like, this is fun. I'm getting to do marketing at a startup. But really, I think didn't expect it to grow into what it would in terms of like my role and the impact there, because we
Sorry, to cut in there real quick.
Yeah.
What year was this? Just for our audience to have some context.
Yeah, I started there right at the beginning of 2011.
Got it. Right at the beginning of cheap pay-per-click ads.
Yes.
Shall I say? Yeah.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah. There, I remember us being upset that one of the top keywords we wanted to go after was $6 a click. So it was pretty cheap. There was just a lot, and we didn't totally know yet, but really landed on like the inbound model with the inside sales rep, and that started to work. And I just sort of found myself in the driver's seat of growth, because that was really just heavily driven from the marketing that I was doing. So ended up being just a fantastic opportunity there. And so I think, joining Sprout was definitely a pivotal moment. And then I think also, maybe not necessarily one point on the timeline, but just, after several years, it had head of sales come in and everything. It really, CMO and like the organization matured a lot, and really, I think, kind of shifted into, a marketing leader type of role where there was, a broader team, and we're planning further out in advance and thinking bigger and doing things that were less tactical and just more long-term strategic, and really like driving that growth that ultimately led to, 100 million in ARR and IPO. So I'd say that would probably be another big area, which is sort of that shift from like doing the marketing and building the early stages into the marketing leadership inside of a larger company.
And from there, you so I guess once you left Sprout Social, which was what in the last few years or so, was it 2019 or around this time? Yeah,
it was end of 2019. Yep. Yeah, so I left it.
I took on a lot of. Sorry, you go.
Sorry, yeah. Let's not go on. I left at the end of 2019, and really was just sort of at a point. So ironically, it was sort of pre-pandemic, and so less of the norm, but I really wanted a bit more flexibility, not have to commute, work from home. And so just started out by consulting with a number of SaaS companies and kind of just helping, ended up kind of finding a niche, which was like helping, in between marketing leaders, kind of be an interim leader and then help interview and hire a new marketing leader, onboard them, and kind of work myself out of a job. So kind of just transitioning from what I was doing at Sprout and sort of that like broader growth, acquisition, marketing leadership, and then just kind of helping a number of companies with that. So did that for like a year and a half, I think, before starting Tenspeed.
So obviously now, basically, I mean, you somehow moved from being employed or working for a company to working for your own business. Give me actually 1, 2, or 3, or as many reasons, or as many elements as you want, in terms of which were the biggest shifts in your mind, in your perception.
I would say one big one is that it's like you lose all guardrails.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're in a role with a company, like you have some guardrails of like, this is your job, and other people are doing these other parts. And it also just in terms of what you want to do. So I think like that was a bit of a learning of like, even just coming out of it, it was like, do I keep consulting? Do I build group coaching? Do I build courses? Do I, like, there's so many things you could do. Do you write a book? Do you just blog? Do you start a podcast? Like, so it's a bit different that you become the person that has to kind of give yourself the guardrails and determine what those should be, because like you literally can do anything. And that is a bit different after being an employee at a company for a long time.
I suppose during these kind of like fractional kind of gigs that you had, which I presume were kind of between 6 to 12 months typically, I presume you kind of created somewhat of a kind of template by which, within that time frame you could establish certain like key principles. And I imagine that kind of template is something that you've been able to adapt or adopt slightly within Tenspeed as well. can you tell us a little bit about that approach? Like if you're going into this fractional role, or if you're working with a new client now, like what are the kind of key elements of that framework that you can kind of, come into a SaaS company at a certain stage and help them get those foundations into place?
Yeah, I think, so I certainly did not document like a firm framework or process. But, looking back, I think there were certainly some things that evolved there. Some elements of it translated into what we do at Tenspeed, but I kind of went from like that fractional marketing leader to really kind of focusing a bit. Tenspeed's much more focused in like content marketing and SEO. So there's some elements of it that didn't necessarily translate, but I think I think the three areas were sort of like the people, like what's the team like, where are the skill sets, kind of like understanding where everything's at there. So the technology, tech stack, and then just a lot of like process stuff, I think were kind of three big areas. And so it depended a bit. Like I think I worked with a number of companies that are sort of Series A, Series B, like 10 to 20 million in revenue. And so I think that was a pretty good place to be in terms of like, there's enough going on, there's enough to work with. Some of the like early stage companies I work with, there's, less areas to focus, but initially, and I think some of the elements of this kind of apply at a smaller scale with Tenspeed, but initially it's like understanding where a company's at and how they are currently working, and just having that like, new set of eyes, fresh perspective of where things seem off or odd, and a lot of folks, I think, in the early interviews will kind of bring you a lot of like, well, here's our problem. If we just fix this, it would be good. But a lot of times, if you don't jump right into solutioning, you uncover that those are just symptoms of the actual problem, and then kind of get in a bit deeper into that. So for one client, there was just a lot of frustration around like the lead handoff from marketing to sales, and like information there and slowness and whatever. And so a lot of the suggestions and things were very like kind of solving the surface level stuff, when in reality we just ended up implementing Chili Piper, which kind of like solved a ton of that, because it just like people were booking directly with the AEs if they met a certain criteria, and just like skip a lot of the, an SDR didn't follow up for 3 days, and then this didn't get marked in the CRM and that kind of stuff. But typically that's maybe not the best example. I like to also avoid technology changes. Like it's the worst thing, to be like, hey, let's work together for 6 months, and then come in and be like, let's spend all of 6 months moving you from HubSpot to Marketo because that's my preference, and then I'm gonna leave. Like that's the worst. So that I tended to try to like make technology a last resort, but I do think those are three big areas that like if you understand team skill sets and just be able to say like, this is helpful, but like we need to round this person out and give them some more responsibilities. This is a skill set you're sorely missing on the team. And like, I think the big thing was just like, once you better understood where they're at, where their opportunity is from a channel perspective and the market and everything, then that's where I was able to kind of say, I would really look for a marketing leader that's very strong in like brand and storytelling, or, more of like performance and acquisition, and be able to kind of help lay out a bit more detail on what would be the ideal candidate to be able to take them to the next level.
Mm-hmm. So, and because we mentioned briefly Tenspeed and your company now, can we dive deeper a bit more into the palette of what kind of services are you offering? Where is your main area of focus, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, so I think, we primarily work with SaaS companies, but not exclusively. And we kind of sit at that intersection of content marketing and SEO. So content marketing is a very broad discipline that can, there's all kinds of, video, podcast, case studies, sales enablement, is, just the list goes and goes and goes. And so we really are kind of, a lot of our clients have a content marketer on the team that kind of is that like broad content marketing resource, and then we kind of go deep in one area. So we're really focused on understanding the ICP that they have, like who's their target audience, who they really want to attract, and then doing all of our research through that lens, identifying, from a search perspective, topics that are, going to create good topic clusters and be the right areas that they want to build authority. And so we kind of help build that strategy, but then also kind of incorporate other content needs that they have. So it may not necessarily have as much of a search opportunity, but it's just a good piece of content that will help fuel other marketing efforts. And we help.
Would it be fair to describe? Sorry, would it be fair to describe your services more revolving around the inbound marketing?
Yes.
Got it. Okay, sorry, you can go.
Yep. So we create content. I think kind of have the SEO lens. So we're making sure if there's an opportunity that the content is optimized, but we're also interviewing a subject matter expert at the company, kind of a journalistic style, pulling out their point of view and their perspective on things, and kind of blurring the lines between like SEO content and thought leadership. So really kind of serves both purposes. And then, outside of that, we do SEO, like on-site optimization, technical SEO, some of that stuff. And then we also do like create social content for distribution around a lot of the written content, incorporate podcasts and videos into the content, things like that, to really kind of pull it all together. So the main goal is like kind of just like awareness, building brand awareness, generating the traffic and leads and revenue, I think, are kind of the areas that we're focused.
And I'm assuming because you kind of moved into this, very focused area on content and SEO, this was also a big kind of pillar of growth whilst you were at Sprout Social, and therefore that's what you've kind of grown up with in a way through your marketing career. Also, one thing just to add as well is that I actually first came across Tenspeed via Derek, who I believe is the marketing manager over there, because of a lot of the videos he was doing and content he was doing also on LinkedIn. So that obviously forms very much a part of your strategy as a company as well. With this in mind, like what kind of focus and what kind of key factors would you say that you gave both during Sprout Social time and now on your website, and kind of what, kind of key components of your website do you think exist, and how do you go about optimizing that as a kind of tool within your marketing suite?
Yeah. So yes, to confirm your assumption, like content and SEO was a huge part of growth for us at Sprout, and organic was the number one revenue channel for new business. And so we had that. And Kevin, my co-founder at Tenspeed, was head of SEO on my team for about 5 years at Sprout. And so yes, we very much had the opportunity to build and scale B2B blog and revenue, big revenue channel for a company. So that is a big part of where we came. So yeah, for both Sprout and for this, I think we typically look through or at least I do, like 3 lenses. One is brand, one is product marketing, and then one is sort of like performance. And so every website has to do all 3 of those. And that's, I think, the interesting balance. There are a lot of like SEO purists and folks that will kind of like, I'm just going to build my own site and it's going to be fully optimized. And that's totally fine. But like, you're just building a bigger company. Like you just have the give and take of, yes, this exact phrase would be the most optimized, but like this one is actually better at sort of selling the benefit of the product or positioning in a certain way. So you have kind of that balance and like just need to work together with everyone and do that. So I think, so let's say, brand, product marketing and performance. And again, obviously performance is not only SEO, but the conversion aspect of that and everything you're doing with paid and everything on that front. And then I think, from the analytics perspective, that becomes important across all of that. So does that answer your question, or is there more to that?
No, absolutely. Yeah. I guess one other additional kind of element to the question would be like in your role today and for Tenspeed, like specifically, like, are you getting a lot of new clients, inbound via the website, or have things changed slightly now that you're kind of working on this agency kind of basis? Or is the website still kind of that conversion engine that you're trying to optimize?
Yeah. It's getting there. I think it's certainly, it's been a challenge, like starting from zero with something versus, the companies worked with that are much higher volume. So, but yeah, it's definitely getting to that point where we have a pretty steady stream of that. I think there's a lot of interesting insights that we get. Like certainly the LinkedIn stuff you mentioned continues to be a big part of inbound and like a big distribution channel for us. And so we have like self-reported attribution in our form, and we like over half of the inbound leads are citing LinkedIn generally, which is, we post personally on there. We have a company page. We have, a small amount of LinkedIn ads. Like, so I don't know exactly sometimes which one of those is really from a self-reported standpoint. I don't know which one they're talking about, but generally we know that is an important distribution channel. But we do also get some that's, coming in through our content and finding us that way and becoming a lead. So it's definitely been growing and getting more and more a factor for us.
And since you're talking about websites and conversion of traffic on websites, do you maybe have any favorite websites which you saw maybe even recently? You can give us any 2 or 3 names of maybe even bigger companies or other companies which you think they have a really good strategy in terms of how to structure a website.
I think one that's interesting that I just kind of continue to go back to a bit, and it kind of speaks again to a bit of the product marketing side of things. Stripe, stripe.com is always like interesting to me because they have grown now. They just have so many products. And so I think that becomes an interesting lesson of sort of like, how do you structure something to where, each one of these could be a standalone startup and be like a converting page. And so I think that one's always a bit interesting. And then I think just generally, I'm not coming up with any examples off the top of my head, but I think there's definitely a growing trend right now of more and more companies pulling their product out of the app and like onto the web experience to let people, whether it's sandbox or something, like initially start to play around with the product and engage before they even sign up. And I think would just be another great example. I just don't have a specific one in mind at the moment, but I think that's probably another big one that I think is very interesting, because having been at Sprout and just seeing, week in and week out, that it's just sort of like a known thing that 30% of people would sign up and never come back. And so you're just already missing out on all of that. And so be able to pull more of that experience out and have more people engage through product is very, very interesting.
And to get a little bit kind of slightly geeky for a minute, when it comes to, either in your current role now at Tenspeed or in previous experiences, when it comes to website analytics, were there ever any kind of key metrics or key kind of combination of metrics or key things you used to focus on when it comes to ensuring that, the website was staying optimized and making sure that things were working as they should?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things that I would say is definitely like maybe a bit more general advice, but one is like just making sure it's properly set up. So that should sound like a given, but we just encounter a lot of companies that it's not, the script's not on every page, or the conversion goals aren't set up, or they're not set up correctly, or they're double counting or whatever. And so we certainly run into a bit of that. And so I think, from an ongoing perspective, certainly at Sprout, like we would just routinely crawl the website, with looking for the parameter of the code and or the tracking script and a number of things there to just kind of make sure like everything's good from that perspective. And then I think another area that I often recommend for people is like there's a lot of different ways you can handle attribution, first touch, last touch, W models, multi-touch, all kinds, like there's just a lot of things you can do. But I think the most important thing is just to understand what settings your system has. So if you're relying on Google Analytics, like are you using last touch or first touch? If you're using Marketo or HubSpot, like even just like you have to know that, because even if you're just going to use that one data point, the difference between first touch and last touch is pretty substantial a lot of times in terms of how you're actually making decisions, analyzing the behavior of people. So I think just knowing, so even if I don't think there's a holy grail of this is the perfect attribution model, but just know what you're working with. And I think beyond that, go ahead. Yeah.
Because I wanted to intervene exactly on this point, because also if lots of websites or most of the websites are using cookies in a way, this is one thing. And we just, I watched a study lately or recently made by a university in Germany. It's called Bochum University. And they actually mentioned that most of the people, around 85% of the people, are actually declining cookies. So essentially, you're losing most of the data in a way.
Yeah.
So that's why also it's really good also to have a complementary tool maybe, which would be privacy first, in order to have like a full comprehension of your traffic on the website.
Yeah.
Sorry to yeah.
Yeah. No, I that's a huge point for sure. I think that, and obviously going to continue to move that way. Like GA4 is coming.
Exactly.
If you haven't already moved there, that's the thing. And so a lot of what we've used over the last 10, 15 years is not going to necessarily be as relevant. So totally agree with that. And then I think the other points I would just make is just sort of like needing to be able to like easily pivot data and also understand how it ties to business outcomes. So I'd say that's like working with a lot of companies, the two areas that don't happen. It's just sort of like, well, this channel brings us this many leads, this one brings us this many leads, and there's not necessarily that pivoting of like, okay, well, what about, that specific paid search campaign by country, by browser type, by landing page, like all these different ways you can be pivoting that. And then, further then understanding which ones actually become customers and not just leads. And then even further into which ones have the greatest lifetime value and not just, become a subscriber. And so it's kind of like continuing to go further and further down the funnel and understanding how you can really tie the marketing channels to true long-term business effect.
Yeah, it's like Chris Walker from Refine Labs. He posted something recently, which was the comparison of data, using an attribution software and using the self-attribution approach, and the comparison of like certain channels and how little had been attributed to SEO, or how much had been attributed towards organic, for example, using the kind of this attribution software. And when it was self-attribution, so much more was coming from dark social and LinkedIn and these places. So it's really important these days that people are really truly, have clarity on where their users are coming from and what channels are really actually working.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to ask you on this note, because we see, for instance, in Europe that lots of companies at the enterprise level are converging more and more towards privacy-first solutions. And I know that you're working with lots of SaaS companies as well. Do you have any approaches in terms of enterprise marketing? Do you have any strategies you're seeing now, or tactics which you see now that are working better than before, or which are gaining traction for the moment in terms of enterprise level companies or leads?
I don't know, because I would say like I think generally like the smaller companies are just like shifting and innovating faster, which makes sense. I mean, that's kind of been true for a long time of bigger companies, but I think there's a lot of smaller companies that are kind of pivoting a bit and having like good blog content and a podcast and repurposing and pulling clips and sharing on social and just sort of like building into this this model versus I think a lot of on the enterprise side is still just still seeing a lot more of just like blog posts and ebooks and obviously other channels,
exactly.
Events and broader sponsorships and stuff.
Yeah, we see the same thing actually in our area of activity as well. That's we launched this media approach, and we're definitely thanking you actually taking part of it in the beginning, and actually having these companies, B2B companies, engaging in marketing nowadays with a media first approach, starting to build audiences rather than funnels, which we saw in Demand 2022. It was a virtual summit we attended recently, and it's brilliant. You also mentioned that you're handling also podcasts. Do you have any specific advice in terms of setting up a media approach? Which were maybe 2 or 3 key elements you would need to consider whenever you want to start a media approach as a B2B SaaS company?
Yeah. So to clarify, we our primary involvement with podcasts is tying, like integrating that existing stuff with blog content, and then also like we help some people take the full episode, cut it down, turn it into like the clips that are captioned and everything for social, for like a distribution standpoint. So we're not necessarily doing like the strategy and like building shows for people, but I guess, from my perspective though, since we are doing that and then work with a number of folks that do, I think the biggest thing, like blogging before was like, let's blog about anything that has a keyword that we can rank for. And I think that has changed, and it all feels very similar to me from a, like, if you even put written content, blog content under media, the media first approach, I think, is just heavily understanding the audience and what is important to them, what, how you can help educate them, how you can like solve problems for them, any of that. And then it just becomes a format. It's ideally you're doing that across multiple formats, which is, social content, podcast, video, blog content written, like you're kind of distributing in a number of ways. So I still think it fits well in that sense, but to me, I think it's all about much more of an audience first versus like, hey, we're just going to try to rank for certain keywords.
I guess one of the bigger challenges as well, it kind of relates to what you've just said, which is smaller companies and startups are much quicker at innovating. And, all of these smaller companies that are emerging, they all want to, they need to find channels that are working and approaches that are working. And B, they tend to have their fingers on the pulse in terms of like what's happening, what areas can we explore now? And therefore, just simply exploring a media strategy or taking a certain approach is not enough. You have to kind of differentiate yourself within that space as well. So it's trying to really niche down in a certain area or do something a bit differently to other people as well. Because, same thing with blogs. Back 10, 15 years ago, or maybe a bit longer than that, simply having a blog, was something that was kind of considered to be innovative, or new and enough to try and start building something. But of course, nowadays that's not possible to just have a blog. You need to have proper structure to it. So I think the same thing's true when it comes to media strategy and podcasts, all these different approaches too. We touched upon it a little bit when you mentioned the kind of fractional roles you've had in terms of the tech side of things. But generally speaking, like, kind of maybe specifically for B2B SaaS and that kind of growth range that you mentioned before, around 10, 20 million, what are kind of the common mistakes you see with tech, and what are kind of some of your key suggestions or advice when it comes to the MarTech stack and how it should grow with a company and how to ensure that it kind of remains optimized?
Yeah, great question. If there's quite a few, but a few I think that are most prevalent and important. One is like technology is just technology. Like it is not. It's like I think it can be easy to get into this feeling of like, if we just had this tool, everything would work, or if we just had this tool, we would grow, or whatever. And that's rarely the case. Like, it's just code and interface, and especially things that are involving data inputs and outputs, like, that just doesn't change a lot. And so, if your startup's not growing, like, it's not because you're on Marketo and you need to be on HubSpot, like that. And that's probably just a crude example, but it definitely creeps in, especially as a company gets bigger, into sort of the talk tracks and rationale is sort of like, well, we just need this tool, and whatnot. So I think the tool is not the solution. That that's certainly one of them. And I think that it gets more and more important to understand how everything works together. And I think that's where you see that definitely at the enterprise level. Like, they will knowingly choose something that looks like it was built in 1995 if it actually just works with everything that it needs to. And they'll say, too bad, to the people on the front end, because that is more important than, the new seed stage company with a really slick looking product, but you got to use Zapier to try to tie everything together or whatever. So I do think that's important. And so those are two sort of extreme examples, but in the middle, that does become a factor, that if you push that to the side too much, then you start having a lot of, marketing operations tech debt, sales operations tech debt. You're hiring people to pull manual reporting because you chose a tool to do one thing over another. Like, there's a lot there that I think starts to become a pretty big factor. And then I think the third thing would just be from the marketing side and like the MarTech and looking at everything that's possible. I think it's just important to have people that, at least, one person, but ideally multiple people, that understand the tools, use the tools, and it's not like kind of pushed off to the side in this thing that nobody really understands. But I think that sort of that people side of it is really important too, to be able to manage things, keep them up, keep the hygiene, like make sure they're working, all of that stuff that kind of comes with the ongoing maintenance of the tool once you get past the exciting part of buying it.
I guess that's also...
But just to kind of insist on the topic. Yeah, go ahead. You go ahead, Matt. Sorry.
I was going to say, I guess that's also linked just to like the onboarding process, right? Because like, I think a lot of companies, I've been guilty of this, certainly myself in the past, maybe slightly even in the present, of like, getting a new piece of MarTech and being like, right, cool, let's roll with it. Let's start using it. But without having that proper onboarding process in place, making sure we understand like what the milestones are, who the kind of key users are, and how we're going to get that technology working for us in an efficient way, it can just end up becoming more of a headache than it is a help. And that's when things start to fall apart a little bit.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you, just to insist a bit on this topic. Do you have any, in terms of marketing aspects of things, do you have any 2 or 3 pieces of software you're using on a daily basis or with a high recurrency maybe?
I mean, so we use HubSpot for like the market automation and CRM. So I think that's definitely one that we're using heavily. And in terms of the tech stack, I mean, I think like maybe not a daily use, but I still like really have a lot of put a lot of value in like Hotjar or any sort of heat mapping tool. I think continues to kind of be underrated, I think, or just underused for a lot of people in terms of just having a way to really understand that. And obviously there's others that go, deeper into the product from a product perspective, which are also great. But anything there that you're just really kind of understanding the engagement and usage of the website or the product is super important. Outside of that, one that I think, I mean, obviously a lot of people know about Clearbit, so it's not like they're an unknown company, but like we use there's like a free version of Clearbit Reveal product, and so you just put that script on your site, and then every week it tells you people from certain companies that we're visiting and which pages they were engaging with and that kind of stuff. And so that's been massively helpful for us, even just from that perspective and just understanding, even seeing the shift over time from like a wide range of types of company into seeing like the majority being kind of in the like internet and software bucket, and knowing like, okay, we're getting more people from the right places, seeing certain companies, just signals that we can use, kind of like connect to them on social or, a number of things we can do from there. But it's also just massively helpful from a content perspective in seeing which posts or podcast episodes or whatever people are engaging with. So that would be a few that I think we're using pretty regularly from like a website MarTech standpoint.
That sounds super useful. I'll take a look at that myself. I hadn't come across this free Clearbit solution, so I'll take a look.
It's cool.
Obviously, like right now, it's quite well documented, and we don't want to focus too much on it with regards to the difficult economic crisis that we're currently in. Also, from a B2B kind of tech perspective, the massive impact this has had on a lot of companies in our space. We personally, because we're bootstrapped and we're making profit in these things, we don't experience it personally, but I think anyway, it directly affects like even your strategy and your approach when you understand that the whole sector obviously is going through a certain period. With that in mind, both as a kind of company, but also as yourself personally, what kind of key areas, both in terms of strategy, but also just in terms of anything else really related to your own personal growth, what key areas are you focused on as we move kind of towards 2023?
Yeah, great question. From like the Tenspeed side of things, I think a couple areas are just, you've really just been trying to be laser focused on like our positioning and messaging and differentiation, and just be like, we've definitely seen the shift. Like it's gone from, hey, someone referred us to you, like generally tell me what you do and kind of what it costs, like cool, I want to work with you, to really getting multiple bids from different companies and like understanding and more questions about the nuances of how we do what we do. So I think it's like not that we were intentionally being lazy before, but I think just the time prior to some of this, I think just everyone was sort of like moving faster and less diligence, and now really puts a microscope on that. So I think that's where we're really focused on like nailing down positioning, messaging, really differentiating, doing some of that stuff. And then I think outside of that, it's just trying to stay really in tune with marketing leaders, content marketers. Like, we're seeing more and more folks even just posting on LinkedIn of like, still have big goals for next year and my budget's still slashed and we have less people. Like that's a new real challenge and pain point for people. And so, not that we're trying to like upend what we do and totally change our services, but we need to stay on top of things and understand what's most important to people and how we can be most helpful in helping them hit those goals. So I think that's another area, is just trying to stay really close to customer feedback and where people are at in the market. And then personally, I think I'm just really, I think there's still a huge opportunity in the coming year just to continue to build our own audience, and that's like, personal brand on LinkedIn, as well as we have our own newsletter, our own podcast. So like even if that doesn't materialize into as many leads or new clients over the next 9 to 12 months, there's still a great value in building our audience during this time. So that's just another big area in personal focus as well.
And because we know the path of a marketer is, we mentioned it's not that linear, let's say. You're experiencing many elements from different backgrounds, so on and so forth, because I'm saying this because many of our guests experience the same thing. What advice would you have for a junior marketer or for a person who aspires to get into this domain of activity?
Yeah, I agree with you. I had at one point I had like 5 people on my team at Sprout Social, and I think 2 of them studied political science in college. And I was like, how's 40% of my team, poli-sci majors? But yes, it's wild the way people get into marketing, and they come from all different paths. I think the 2 things I would say for junior marketers, and things that that kind of regardless of how you get into marketing, I think are helpful. One is just understanding data. There's certainly some folks that get into marketing a little bit more from a creative side, or just it's not necessarily their personality to want to get into the numbers and stuff. And I think as much as you can understand, like I said, like, what is attribution? How is data getting to where you are to know that you feel confident in it? But also understanding, if you're a SaaS company, understanding the unit economics of your company and the important things to build sustainable data, and like I said, lifetime value, and like where's really the most value. Like, there's so many things that you just keep going deeper and deeper into the data. As a marketer, it will just continue to make you better. And the other area I would say is to not just try to, like, don't only focus on improving your marketing skills. I think there are other skills that are adjacent to marketing that will also just make you a better marketer. And you don't have to be like mastery, because I think mastery across 10 disciplines is completely unrealistic. But if we're talking about, like, again, attribution, data inflow, analytics being set up correctly. If you just have a general proficiency of JavaScript and knowing how to look at source code, you can, go a bit further. Instead of going to a developer and saying it doesn't work, go to them and say, it looks like there's a missing semicolon here, or, that kind of thing. So there's just things that you can kind of, get a bit better if you know that. I think statistics is incredibly important. Buyer psychology is another one. And so I think there's just things that you can learn about and understand that will then improve your overall marketing abilities, because you're kind of having a more well-rounded thing. Your finance is another one. If you understand how to read a P&L and a balance sheet and free cash flow and, a few other areas there, I think it just makes you have a better context in decision-making and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, great advice. I think also, like, super important advice even to senior marketers, right? Because there are some senior marketers who get stuck in their lane and don't want to venture too far outside of that.
Sure.
B, there are senior marketers who get people in their team and they kind of assume that they would already know certain things. Like, one example would be like the reasons why they're doing something. And one thing I found a lot is you need to make sure you're communicating very clearly. This part of your job is related to this goal, and this is how you're impacting it, and this is why we're going after this goal, because it links into this objective. Just connecting the dots for them, so you're not just letting them work blindly, unaware of what they're actually kind of contributing towards. Great stuff. So this brings us on to what we call our bonus segment. Dragos always says it's the much hyped 5 things you decide.
But it is, yeah, because it's much awaited from all of our audience.
Yeah. So basically, this is, you've already given so many great nuggets of advice, and you've given them in such a structured kind of way that I feel like this bonus segment has almost been the kind of whole podcast. But yeah, just to end on one more kind of note, a top 5 you decide. So whatever it is that you want to focus on, give us kind of 5 pieces of advice that you would into that topic.
Yes, cool. Yeah, so I'm going to focus on top 5 tips for B2B content marketing. So one I alluded to a bit earlier, is starting with ICP. So I mentioned that's what we do for our services, but also, we talk about the media company, the audience being a really important factor. So understand, to be clear, ICP meaning ideal customer profile. So if you don't have that set up, it's kind of, basically another way of saying, what are, all the details of your ideal customer, your target audience, persona. There's a number of ways that gets phrased. So start with that. Make sure you're really focused on that instead of, like I said, chasing high search volume or some other tactic that seems exciting but may not be relevant to them. So start there. Always recommend, focusing on quality over quantity. There's, again, like, it doesn't matter if you're creating a ton of content that's subpar. Every piece of content, every visit to your site is a brand touch, is a brand experience, and it's either positive or negative. There's nothing neutral in that realm. So if you're not, if you're trying to do too much quantity and taking away from the quality, then you are diminishing, brand impact and a lot of other areas. The third would be to optimize existing content. This is actually how we really got started with Tenspeed, was primarily focusing on refreshing and optimizing and consolidating existing content for clients. And it is a hugely important thing. It's one of the best ways to kind of get some quick traffic back if you've had a lot of decay over time, and also just critically important to truly having the compounding growth over time is to not have be losing traffic from some of your existing content. The fourth would be distributing and repurposing content. So again, we kind of view organic search as a distribution channel. And so when you just put all of your eggs in that basket, you optimize for search, don't do anything else, you're kind of, like I said, putting all your eggs in one basket and depending on that. So, repurposing the content into a number of formats on social. It could be, text posts or, carousel posts on LinkedIn or whatever it might be. There's also, turning it into a newsletter or sending that out to your clients or your customers. Even just like enabling your sales team with content that might be relevant to something that's a prospect's dealing with. They can send, there's a lot of ways you can reuse and distribute your content. And then lastly, is just measuring more than just revenue. So kind of touching back on the attribution stuff we talked about, like most content marketing is not directly bringing someone to your site, they sign up and then become a paying customer. The majority of it is sort of discovery, how they're finding you, a bit more on like the demand creation side to really kind of bring people in, building awareness, building your audience. And so I think the programs that we've seen get cut short and not reach their full potential were measured on a more of a PPC model of, we spent this, we got this, and we're not happy with the ROI. And so that's, I think, the last big area that I would say for truly building long-term. I think you have to measure some various points across the funnel and brand and customer experience to really see the full potential of what content is doing.
I mean, extremely useful stuff, and many thanks for sharing the input with us. Obviously, this is even more important that it's one of our most followed sections, the top 5 of whatever you choose. Anyways, Nate, So folks, we had Nate Turner with us. He's from Tenspeed, from Chicago area, from the US. Many thanks, Nate, again. I hope we can see each other also in person. And guys, keep an eye on TWIP. Hit the subscribe button. You can follow us also on YouTube, but also on other podcast carriers. I am Dragos. I'm here with my co-host Matt, and we're seeing you the next time.